proximity ought to cause you to lead with empathy, not condemnation. I'm just in the gym, y'all. I'm just having some thoughts that I want to drop on you. Maybe somebody needs this. It's the fact that when you actually get close enough to people and you put context to the people that you encounter, it gets harder to see them in light of a product or something that only benefits you selfishly. And you actually begin to put humanity in the context of the stories you hear and the people you encounter. That ought to cause you to move in empathy, because you learn and understand how they arrived where they are and why they operate the way they do. I want to give you an example. You know, I have encountered enough people in my life, enough women in my life, personally, who have kind of taken on the persona of being an independent woman. If you only knew half the stories of the women who have come up in homes where they had invisible fathers, where they had relatives who had authority in their life that were not protectors of them, and who did not feel safe to confide into authority figures such as their parents, maybe older siblings, older brothers, who have been through so much, even to the point of physical abuse, sexual abuse, that the way that they began to cope through those things was being able to convince themselves that since they were not placed in positions and environments of being protected by people who they thought that would protect them, who they thought should be protecting them, there was a perspective that was developed where they thought to themselves that the world isn't safe. So how do I operate in a world that isn't safe? I have to learn how to do everything on my own. I have to learn how to become independent on my own and not depend on anybody else, no man or anybody else, to help me along the way. And when that kind of stuff is developed as a child, when that stuff is developed as an adolescent, it creeps into your adulthood. And then you wonder why there's so much conflict between men and women. Men who are like, women are too masculine, women are too independent. And on some aspect, women who turn it around on men too feminine, men too this, men too that. However, if you only understood the story that was behind why they arrived the way they did, if you put some context to that person, you would actually move with empathy and understand, wow. So no wonder you move in your independence so strongly. No wonder you may feel you have to lean more into your masculinity, because you have come from backgrounds where you didn't feel protected, you didn't feel seen, you weren't valued, and you were harmed by people who you thought you should be able to trust, who you thought were supposed to look out for you. So in turn, you believed that the world wasn't safe. And so how you cope with that was feeling like you had to do everything on your own. And to relinquish that in an immediate moment because somebody comes across your path is not easy. And so what we all need is process. What we all need is time to be able to unpack those wounds and address them accordingly, because oftentimes in some way, shape, or form, it connects to an inner child version of us that has yet to be healed through the pains we experienced and the things we observed as we were growing up, that we internalized and we used as coping mechanisms to survive certain experiences. Listen, y'all, I just want to remind you that the more you're willing to get in proximity to people, the more you're willing to move in empathy and not condemnation. And maybe instead of putting ourselves out here and turning our social media pages into a he said, she said, into an all-out war of why men are good and women are trash, or women are the best and men are trash, maybe we all could just benefit in getting to learn the context behind the stories we hear and the people we encounter, so we stop treating them as products, but we start honoring them in the way that God loves them, in the way that God sees them, because people count to God. And just like you have a story and context, they do too. And it's not so easy to just relinquish what somebody is so programmed to doing simply because somebody who has the capacity to hold that all of a sudden shows up in their life. It's a process. You can't just demand the woman to uplift her independence because you showed up on the scene, my guy. And ladies, you can't just expect a man to grow in certain spaces when he's been in a context of being hurt emotionally, where he's been in a loud context where it quickly learned how he survived through loud environments. serious conflicts, abusive situations was to shut down and internalize. Maybe he was put in positions where he had to do something that was extremely humiliating in the public eye, and that scarred him mentally and emotionally. See, when we get an understanding of these contexts, all I'm saying to y'all is that it actually should move us to move in grace. And that's what I think a lot of us are lacking, that's causing us to not have legitimate, authentic relationships and making room for creating healthy relationships that are created over time. And I think if you're really wanting to nurture and learn how to do relationships the right way and create healthy relationships, you got to make room for the context that is behind the human you're in front of. And asking yourself as you connect with people, do I have the capacity to simply support them in their journey to getting to where they're supposed to be? And I think if we are honest about those things, we would actually choose our friendships and relationships a lot more wisely, I should say. And also learn how to move graciously to people who are trying to learn something that's unfamiliar to them. And as long as there's action plans, there's self-awareness, and there's progress behind what's being communicated on how they are aiming to do better with this, and you see progress, listen, y'all, I think you're in good hands. But if you see somebody who has encountered all that, we can identify all that, and they're like, nah, I'm good, this is just who I am, and I'm not changing for anybody, that might be a relationship worth reconsidering. I hope this all made sense. Just some thoughts from the gym. If it did, type caught it in the comment section below. I know it was a rant, but type caught it anyway. And follow for more as we continue navigating through our healing and doing relationships the right way, which starts with doing the healing work on ourselves first, and also sometimes requires us to reshift our perspective to considering the context behind the humanity we encounter, so that way we move with more empathy and grace instead of condemnation and throwing stones unnecessarily.